G'day guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the review for round 3. A couple of big games, a big upset to start the round. So let's not waste any more of your time. Let's get to the review for round 3. Now on Saturday night we had Hawthorn up against the Giants, and after a really good first quarter from GWS, it was Hawthorn who really came to the show when they got the weather conditions their way and won by 12 points. 76 to Hawthorn, 64 to the Giants. Now it wouldn't be a game in Tasmania without the weather playing a factor, and the toss was all important with a significant advantage going to the Giants in the opening term with a 5-goal breeze to their backs, and they took full advantage. GWS kicked the only 5 goals of the opening term, but unfortunately did miss a few chances. But the Giants' pressure was a real factor in the opening term as well. In a quarter time, they led by 35 points. But of course, with the wind at the backs of the Hawks in the second term, they made their charge back into the contest. They kicked the only 6 goals of the second quarter and did take the lead, but missed a few chances with 6 goals, 8 throughout the entire term. And at the major break, Hawthorn led by 7 points. However, in the third term, the script of the game changed. Despite the Giants having the wind advantage, it was Hawthorn who were the better team. They started to move the ball a lot more freely, and they locked the Giants in the Hawthorn forward half. Not only did they hold their own in the quarter, but with the final 3 goals of the term, they led at 3-quarter time by 20 points. Now, the Giants did kick an early goal to start the final term, but Hawthorn found a way to grind out throughout the majority of the second half of the quarter. They were able to keep the Giants at bay, and even though the Giants kicked the only 2 goals of the final term, Hawthorn did enough to hold on and win by 12 points. So Hawthorn are undefeated heading into their bye. I really don't think they've been the greatest in the last couple of weeks, but like some other teams, they haven't performed at their best, but they're able to accumulate some wins. And if it gets to the end of the season and they've got enough wins on the board, they can start to rest some of these players towards finals. So at the moment, it's all good for Hawthorn. On the Giants, a little bit disappointing. They had a really good start to this contest, but unfortunately couldn't take advantage of the conditions in the second half. And unfortunately, that did cost them in the end. But coming off the bye, I don't have too many concerns about the Giants getting Jesse Hogan back and Jake Stringer into the team. I think they'll be all guns blazing in the next couple of weeks. But getting to the statistics of this game, the only multiple goal kicker for the Hawks was Jack Gunston with the 2. For the GWS, Hogan with 4, Bedford and Toby Green with the 2 goals. On the disposals, Cam McKenzie had 30 touches, McGuinness with the 25, Day with the 24, and Dylan Moore and Ward with the 22. And for GWS, Whitfield with the 34, Green with the 31, Ash with the 29, Himmelberg with the 24, and Kelly with the 23. And finally, looking at the AFL fantasy scores, Blake Hardwick topped for the Hawks with the 98, Meek with the 97, McKenzie with the 95, Watson with the 90, and Weddle with the 86. And for GWS, Lockie Whitfield topped for the game with the 120, Himmelberg 106, Ash with the 100, Bedford with the 96, and Tom Green with the 91. But now, just before we get to the votes, guys, of course, we have to cover the members' vote for round 2. How the members' vote works for you guys. For the review in 2025, a 3-2-1 voting system is awarded for every single game of the AFL season on the channel. And each round, players who receive 3 votes in the game have a chance to get a bonus vote. I will decide the 4 best players from the round, who will enter a poll exclusive for channel members to vote on, and the winner of that poll will receive the bonus vote for the round, the members' vote. And at the end of the 2025 AFL season, every vote counts. So this is your chance to have your say on the 3rd ever Boundary Riders medalist. So if that appeals to you, or if you just want to show some extra support on the channel, then make sure to click the channel membership link down below and join in the fun. But for now, let's get back into the video. And then a members' vote for round 2 goes to Jordan Dawson. But now let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes went to Cam McKenzie, 2 votes to Will Day, and 1 vote to Lloyd Meek. Now I really like the performance of Cam McKenzie tonight. He's been on the periphery for a while now, but 30 touches from him, looked clean around the ball, and he was a pretty high draft pick, so I did like his performance tonight, and hopefully he can continue his good form going into the next couple of weeks after the bye. Will Day could have had an outstanding night. He had 4 shots on goal. Unfortunately, couldn't convert all of them, but he was brilliant in the midfield tonight, and after a couple of down weeks, really responded. And Lloyd Meek, I really liked his performance in the ruck up against Kieran Briggs. Had a down week against Tom Nakoni a couple of weeks ago, but has responded since then, so a good performance from the Hawthorn midfield. Lockie Whitfield was pretty close, but a lot of touches, didn't have a lot of impact in my opinion. After that, we get to Brisbane v Geelong, and in a wet game of football in the first half, the Cats were the better side, but in the second half, when the conditions got a little bit better, the Brisbane Lions looked the much better side. Up at the Gabba, great performance from Brisbane to catch back, take the lead in the last quarter and hold on in the final moments to win by 9 points. Brisbane 70, Geelong 61. Now there was one injury concern from this game, which was Kyle Lohman. He was subbed off in the 3rd term with an ankle injury, and after the game Chris Fagan was a little bit concerned about if he will be available for next week, so keep your eyes on that one there for Brisbane fans. It was tough conditions and in a tough contested contest to start proceeding to the Gabba. Both teams struggled to hit the scoreboard, but it was the Cats who striked early with the first 2 goals of the game. However, the Lions kicked 2 of their own to draw back level, but at quarter time the Cats were were able to find a way to get to an 8-point lead. Now, neither team could strike in the early stages of the second term. However, it was Geelong who were the first team to find the big sticks and piled on 4 goals in a row to take the margin over 30 points. And with only 40 seconds left in the first half, the Lions found themselves 32 points behind and in all sorts of trouble. But a late Brisbane Lions goal did see the margin reduced to 26 points at the major break. And like I said, when the conditions got better, the Lions got better as well. They locked it in their forward half and capitalised on the scoreboard. They kicked the only 4 goals of the third quarter and turned a 26-point halftime deficit into a 1-point lead heading into the final quarter. Now, the Cats struck first to regain the lead, but the Lions again responded. They kept the Cats away from their forward half, and when the Lions kicked 3 goals in a row to give themselves a 15-point advantage in the game, it looked out of reach for Geelong. Now, the Cats kicked a late goal, but coming back from a 32-point deficit is one thing. But to do it against one of the better teams in the competition in Geelong is insanely good from Brisbane, who haven't been at their best just yet, but to go on to win by 9 points and be undefeated shows how dangerous this team could be when the real stuff begins. And on Geelong, pretty disappointing, 1 win from 3 games. They should have banked the game against St Kilda last week, but simply weren't good enough. And right now, a couple of concerns for Geelong. Now, Tom Stewart should be back next week. He was a laid out, but Brisbane, they're banking up wins at the moment, not playing at their best. They're going to be really tough to beat when it gets to the real stuff. Looking at the goal kickers for Brisbane, no multiple goal kickers, just the highest was Zach Bailey with the 1 goal 2 and Rayner with the 1 goal 1. Paddy Dangerfield was the sole multiple goal kicker for the Cats. On the disposals, Will Ashcroft with the 33, McCluggage with the 30, Zorko with the 28, Dunkley with the 26, and Neal with the 20. And for Geelong, Holmes with the 29, Bailey Smith with the 25, Myers with the 22, 19 to Bowes, and Humphreys with the 18. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, 121 to McCluggage, 119 to Zorko, 115 to Ashcroft, 110 to Dunkley, and 91 to Neal. And for the Cats, Holmes with the 119, Bailey Smith with the 112 along with Brian Myers, 88 to Atkins, and 84 to Dangerfield. But let's get to the votes. 3 votes went to Hugh McCluggage, 2 votes went to Will Ashcroft, and the 1 vote went to Dane Zorko. Love Hugh McCluggage's performance. I still think he's quite an underrated player for mine. I really liked the fact that he really grew into it in the second half and lifted his team over the top in the final quarter. So a great performance from him, and same with Will Ashcroft. Some people have questioned his performance over the last couple of weeks looking for easy touches, but he really stood up in this second half as well when his team needed him, and he definitely showed a lot of that Norm Smith sort of form from late last year. And Dane Zorko was one of their few good performers in the first half, and he continues to show how great a player he is, even as he continues to age. So well done there from the Brisbane Lions, staying undefeated going into round 4 next week. Next up, we have St Kilda up against Richmond, and despite a very good first half from the Tigers, the Saints snatched it away from them in the second half, made them look second rate, and won by 82 points in the end. 135 St Kilda, 53 to the Tigers. Now, there was one injury from this game. It was O'Connell. He ran back in a marking contest, and in the latter parts of the opening term received a big hit. Looked pretty groggy in the aftermath and was subbed out soon after. Now, this will probably be looked at by the match review panel because Ryan Mansell pushed him into this contest, and we've seen that's been heavily scrutinised in the early parts of this season. So interesting look there for the Tigers, but for O'Connell, hopefully he'll be back in the game after the next one. But getting to the game itself, like I mentioned, the Tigers started pretty well in this game. They kicked the opening goal of it, but in the early stages, St Kilda didn't seem ready for the contest. Their pressure was extremely low. Comparing it to last week, they simply didn't show up. However, they did finish the quarter with the last 3 goals of it and saw the Saints lead at quarter time by 12 points. Now, the Tigers came out with an early showing in the second quarter with the first 3 goals to regain the lead, but the Saints slowly worked their way back in front throughout the second term, and at halftime they led by 8 points. Now, I'm not sure if Ross Lyon gave his team an absolute serve at the break, but the Saints came out with fire in their eyes and pretty much put the game beyond doubt through the middle parts of the third quarter. They kicked 6 out of the 7 goals in the term to put the Tigers away, and in the final term they kicked 8 goals to make it a 20-goal performance from St Kilda in an 82-point drubbing. So great performance from St Kilda in the second half. I would be a bit concerned with their first half, but I do think a lot of teams are going to take Richmond lightly. We saw that against Carlton a couple of weeks ago, but in the end, St Kilda did what they had to do. They got a nice percentage booster, 2 wins from 3 games. That's a pretty good start for the Saints, and for Richmond, I don't think it's much of a surprise that we saw another beating, and I think they're in for a pretty tough year. But we do know this list is going to be building great into the future, but for the now, they're going to struggle in a lot of games. But moving to the stats in this one, the multiple goal kickers for St Kilda, we saw Mitch Owens with the 4 goals, Wood and Higgins with the 3, Collard, Sharman and Hall with the 2, and the only multiple goal kicker for the Tigers was Campbell with the 3. On the disposals, Jack Sinclair had a field day. He had 40 touches, McRae with the 31, Wanganeen Miller with the 29, Garcia and Marshall with the 23, and for the Tigers, Short with the 26, Hopper with the 25, Ross and Nankervis with the 21, and McIntosh with the 20. And finally, for the AFL fantasy scores, Jack Sinclair top for the game with the 134, Marshall with the 123, McRae with the 113, Wanganeen Miller with the 112, and Garcia with the 110. And for the Tigers, Short with the 101, McIntosh with the 100, Nankervis with the 97, Blight with the 92, and Ross with the 87. Now let's get to the votes. 3 votes went to Jack Sinclair, 2 votes went to Rowan Marshall, and the 1 vote went to Mitch Owens. Great performance by Sinclair. I don't think it would shock too many people to see him getting the 3 votes here. Was prolific, was by far the best player on the ground, and deserved the 3 votes. Rowan Marshall definitely shows that he is the sole ruckman. Did really well today against a good opponent in Nankervis. Great around the ground. And Mitch Owens, even though he kicked the 4 goals in the second half, he still did really well today, and he's been a great inclusion over the last couple of weeks. Next up, we get to the first game on Saturday. It is Melbourne against the Gold Coast Suns, and in the end, it was really a day all about the Gold Coast Suns. They've struggled throughout a lot of their time in the AFL at the MCG, but today, they were a far better side and ran away in the second half with a massive win by 58 points. 62 to the Demons, 120 to the Gold Coast. Now, there's one injury concern. It's really unfortunate here for Xavier Lindsay. He was helped from the field in the opening term with a knee issue after he awkwardly landed in a marking contest and unfortunately was subbed out before quarter time. This guy has been brilliant for the Demons in the first couple of weeks of the season. A high draft pick, great prospect, and unfortunately it does look like a serious knee injury. So hopefully it comes back, that it's not too bad, but big concerns on Lindsay at the moment. But getting to the game itself, the Gold Coast started well early and kicked the first 2 goals of the game, but the Demons' pressure was good for the early parts of the contest. They were up for the fight, however, at quarter time the Gold Coast led comfortably by 19 points. Now the Gold Coast dominated the territory battle throughout the majority of the second term, but the Demons' defence stood up gallantly. However, Melbourne, when they did get the ball forward at times, missed so many opportunities. They kicked 1 goal, 5 for the quarter, and at half-time, the Suns still led by a pretty comfortable 17 points. And despite the Demons recording the first goal of the second half, it was the Gold Coast who finally started to put their dominance throughout the afternoon onto the scoreboard. The Suns kicked 5 goals in a row to take the lead over 40 points, and even though Melbourne pegged it back a little bit, the Gold Coast led by 34 points at the final change, and in the last quarter, the Suns honestly just waxed each other, getting up their numbers, making their averages look a lot better. And in the end, they ran out comfortable winners by 58 points. So the Suns, they have had 2 pretty easy games to start their season. However, I think this is really good signs for them going forward. If they can continue this form the next couple of weeks with some bigger opponents, then maybe they could be right up there. I'm not going to say they're contenders just yet or finals contenders at the moment, because they did start last year 2-0. But at the moment, they've beaten the teams very comfortably who they've played so far. And on Melbourne, after a very good performance in round 1 against the Giants, they have dropped off a cliff. Their midfield is getting smashed, and this midfield consists of Oliver, Petrarca, and Viney. They are getting smashed by teams that they really should be at least breaking even against, and if Melbourne's midfield isn't standing up, then they struggle around the ground, which is evident in the first couple of rounds. But let's get to the statistics in this game. The multiple goal kickers for the Demons was only Harry Sharp. For the Gold Coast, Ben King with the 4, Miller with the 3, and Graham with the 2. On the disposal count, Oliver with the 31, Langdon with the 29, Langford and Bowie with the 26, and Petrarca with the 23. For the Suns, Rao top for the game with the 36, Anderson with the 35, Noble with the 29, Flanders 25, and Humphrey with the 23. And finally, for you AFL fantasy watchers out there, top for the Melbourne Demons was Clayton Oliver with the 108, along with Ed Langdon, Bowie with the 98, Rivers 91, and Salem with the 85. And for the Gold Coast, Matt Rao 129 was brilliant, Noble with the 117, along with Noah Anderson, Miller with the 114, and Closey with the 99. But now let's get to the votes. 3 votes went to Matt Rao, 2 votes went to Took Miller, and 1 vote went to Noble. Great performance from Matt Rao. He has really impressed me this season. I don't know if it's just for extra bit onto his contract, but he is a brilliant player, one of the best midfielders in the comp, and he is doing a lot better at finding the ball out of the clinches right now, finding a little bit of uncontested ball, but he's still one of the best players inside as a midfielder. He was brilliant today. He continues to shine in the Gold Coast colours. Brilliant performance from him. Took Miller, interesting role he's got this year, playing a little bit half forward. He did get quite a few touches as he likes to do, but 3 goals from Took Miller. I don't think he's done that before in his career, so a great job from him. And John Noble, what a recruit he's looking like, playing off a half-back today. Meters gained, had the highest for the game, 29 touches as well. On Friday night, we had Carlton up against the Bulldogs, and despite Carlton getting off to a brilliant start to this game, it was the Dogs who came back in the second half, jumped Carlton at the end, and won by 8 points. 75 to Carlton, 83 to the Dogs. Now, there were a few injury concerns from this game. First of all, we had Zach Williams, who landed awkwardly in a marking contest in the second term, and immediately grabbed for his lower leg. Unfortunately, he was subbed out of the game pretty soon after with an Achilles concern. So really unfortunate for Zach Williams. He has had a lot of injuries over his career, so hopefully this isn't too long, but an Achilles injury usually can take a while. And finally on the Dogs, Oscar Baker came off limping from the ground in the early parts of the final term and was almost immediately subbed out for the Dogs with a quad injury. But let's get to the game itself. Like I said, Carlton blitzed the Dogs out of the box, piling on 3 quick goals to set the tone. And even though the Western Bulldogs started to work their way into the contest, they missed their chances. The Dogs couldn't find the big 6 in the opening term, and with a late Blues goal at quarter time, they led by 23 points. Now the Bulldogs finally kicked their first goal in the early stages of the second term, however the Blues did respond soon after. Some parts of the Dogs game did lift in the second term, with their pressure being a lot more evident, and were able to reduce the margins to 12 points in the latter parts of the quarter. However, Carlton did steady a little, and at half-time they led by 18 points. Starting the third term, it was the Dogs who kicked the first goal, but both teams were putting out maximum effort. Carlton did win the early territory battle, however midway through the quarter the Dogs made their charge. They kicked 4 of the next 5 goals, including a goal from Riley West at 3/4 time to reduce the margin to just 2 points. Now the Blues did kick an early goal to start the final term, but then the Western Bulldogs came hard. They did miss a few opportunities before they did take the lead for the first time in the game midway through the final term, and Carlton did wrestle the lead back for a moment, but the Dogs did make one last push, which was enough. After trailing throughout the whole night, the Dogs were able to steal it at the death and win by 8 points. So a really gutsy win here from the Bulldogs. They have a lot of players out, so if they can bank up some wins early in the season, when all these other players come back like the Bontempellis and the Treloars, hopefully for their sake they can make the finals and even be in a decent spot for it. And for Carlton, 0-3, a really poor start to them. I really don't know where they're going to get their first win, maybe in gather round against the West Coast Eagles, but right now they are in terrible form. So looking at the multiple goal kickers for Carlton, Brody Kemp with the 5, Curnow with the 3 and Young with the 2, and for the Bulldogs, O'Donnell, Darcy and Kennedy all with 2 for the Dogs. On the disposals, De Koning with the 28, Hewitt 27, Chera 26 along with Walsh and Cripps with the 22, and for the Dogs, Davidson with the 31, Liberatore with the 30, Williams with the 26, Sanders with the 24 and Harms with the 22. And finally for the AFL fantasy watchers out there, De Koning with the 134, Hewitt with the 116, Kemp with the 104, Haynes with the 89 and Chera with the 83. And for the Dogs, Liberatore top scored for the game with the 138, Davidson 125, Darcy 99 along with Tim English and Kennedy with the 94. But onto the votes. 3 votes went to Tom Liberatore, 2 votes went to Davidson, and the 1 vote went to Brody Kemp. Liberatore has been leading from the front since the start of the season, with obviously the captain of Bontempelli being out. He is such a great leader for them. We've always seen the attributes that he's been able to bring to his game, like his clearance work and his stoppage play, but he has been really clean with the footy. He's one of the best users at the Dogs right now, and he's did brilliantly tonight with the goal, 10 tackles, and of course 30 touches. Brilliant from him. But Sam Davidson, I believe, is the real story. Played off the wing tonight, had 31 touches, top for the Dogs, took 10 marks around the ground, and he looks like a great prospect going forward. So great work from the Dogs. If they can get these players to go along with them like Davidson going into the latter parts of the year, who knows where this team could be. So on a tough Thursday night under the lid at Marvel, it was expected that Essendon were going to come out with a bit of fight early. However, it was at the end of the game where the Bombers broke the game open with the final 4 goals of it to go out and win their first game of the season by 12 points against Port Adelaide. 72 Essendon, 60 to the Power. Now the game wasn't one to write home about throughout the entire night. Both teams were fumbly, wasteful, and both teams honestly looked like they were nowhere near a finals contender. But Essendon did come out early and responded with their pressure. The Bombers' jumpers were outnumbering Port Adelaide's, but as the quarter went on, the Power did start to work into the contest and actually found themselves in front at quarter time by 6 points. Now, it was a grinding second term, and we only saw 2 goals from either side, kicking 1 goal at the bookends of the term. Port Adelaide kicked the early goal, and Essendon finished with a late goal to reduce the margin to just 3 points at the main break. It was a goal-for-goal third quarter, but it was Essendon who were wasteful. They kicked 2 goals 5 throughout the whole entire quarter, while Port Adelaide kicked 3 goals 2, and at the last change, the Power did hold a 6-point advantage. And when Port kicked the first goal of the final term, it seemed at that point that everything was going in their favour. However, it was the debutant and sub in Essendon's El Harley who provided some much-needed spark for the Bombers. He was involved in their first goal of the final term, and in the end, the Bombers finished with the last 4 goals of the game to run over the top of Port and claim a 12-point win. So Essendon, it wasn't exactly a convincing win. I don't really know how much the rest of their season's going to lie, but they did get the monkey off the back. They got their first win of the season, so who knows? Maybe they can get their season up and going. I did like the look of a couple of their players. It wasn't just Zach Merritt last night who got them over the line. We saw some good performances from a couple of different players around the ground. Their midfield was solid, but Essendon did show some good determination in that final term. I thought when Port kicked the first goal that the game was done, but Essendon really found something. And for Port Adelaide, this is really disappointing. They had a good win last week against Richmond in response to their terrible loss against Collingwood the week before. And I really thought they were going to get the season up and going, Port. However, their stars were non-existent. Rosie had 22 touches. I couldn't have told you he had more than 10. Same with Jason Horne-Francis. He did kick a good goal in the last quarter, but other than that, he had some terrible moments. Port Adelaide were extremely fumbly, and at the moment, they're playing like a bottom 10 team. And this team finished in the top 2 last year. They are a shell of them former selves, and they need to respond next week. Now, getting to the statistics in this game, the multiple goal kickers on Essendon's side was Caddy and Draper with the 2. And for Port Adelaide, it was Georgiades and Burne-Jones with the 2 as well. For the disposal count, Essendon, of course, Zach Merritt up the top with the 34 touches, Dersma with the 29, Durham with the 28, Shield with the 25, and Caldwell with the 23. And for Port Adelaide, Ollie Wines with the 31, Moraes with the 27, Burgoyne with the 27 as well, Bergman 26, and Rosie with the 22. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, Xavier Dersma top scored for the game with the 112, Zach Merritt with the 108, Caldwell with the 100, Shield with the 97, and Gresham with the 95. And for Port, Burgoyne with the 112, Bergman with the 104, Wines with the even 100, Moraes with the 93, and Sweet with the 92. But now let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes went to Sam Durham, 2 votes went to Zach Merritt, and the 1 vote went to Jace Burgoyne. Now, it was tough for a little bit there deciding Essendon's 3 or 2 out of Zach Merritt and Sam Durham. The reason why me and my brother decided to go with Zach Merritt for the 2 is there were times last night when he butchered the football, but Sam Durham was brilliant last night. He had 28 touches, he was up and down the ground all night, locked down Rosie at stoppage early as a pseudo-tagging role, and then when Rosie was pushed forward, Durham was even better. So I believe that Durham deserved the 3 votes from this game, and Jace Burgoyne was Port Adelaide's best. Ollie Wines was pretty close to it, but I think Burgoyne was the one who looked the cleanest of any of the Port players out there. But guys, make sure to join us tomorrow as we continue the review for this round. But that is all from me, so we'll catch you all next time.